Ansible inventory. By default, Ansible will use etc Ansible hosts as the inventory file. Let's take a quick look. So here we have an ungrouped host here, and then basically this is just a list of host names, right? And we have groups. So anything in square brackets like this is going to be a group. So you have group 1, group 2, and web servers, a web servers group, and each of them has hosts listed underneath it. Now, we're gonna show you some more elaborate versions of this in a little bit, but for now, let's just jump out of here. And the first thing I want to show you is one way that you can point to a different inventory file or a different hosts file. So, and I'm going to show you a couple ways you can do that. So first thing I want to show you is we're going to edit our config file, and we are going to go ahead, just add in another line here. We're going to specify inventory equals opt inv hosts. So change that right there. And now when we run playbooks or ad hoc commands, we'll be using that hosts file instead of this hosts file right here. So next thing I'm going to show you is another way you can point to another config file. So let's jump over to this window right here. Now, if we were to run, you can also specify them on the command line. So first I'm going to show you how I can run a playbook like this. Ansible playbook test.yaml, and you can specify -i opt inv dev. Now I'm going to run it, and I'll show you this file in just a second. So run this, and we can use this dev inventory file, and we ran it against these two hosts here. Now let's take a quick look at that dev file. So if you look inside opt inv, you'll notice we have dev and prod, and also notice hosts and hosts2. Now hosts is what we set in the config file. So I set it to point to this hosts file instead of the default file in our config file. Now this is an INI file. Basically dev, prod, and hosts are INI files. Now hosts2 is a YAML file. You can have your inventory files, you can have them formatted with INI format or YAML, either one. Now if we take a quick look at dev, let's just cat that out. It's really simple, just a list of two hosts in here. Now we have some more elaborate examples inside hosts and host2. We'll show you that in just a bit. But yeah, that's why we just ran against these two hosts right here. Now if you look at prod, it's basically very similar, still pretty simple, but it's 3 other hosts. Now one thing I'm going to show you, you can specify multiple inventories. So you can do a -i dev and a -i opt inv prod. So you can specify both of those inventories, and we're going to run against both inventory files. And there we go. It ran against all 5 hosts spread across 2 inventory files. Now, next thing I'm going to show you. All right, so we've already talked about INI versus YAML, and we can also set host-specific variables in the config files. One thing I wanted to mention real quick is that there are some default groups. There is the default group all, just ALL, all, and that specifies all hosts in an inventory file. There's another group called ungrouped, and that refers to all hosts that are not in a group in your inventory file. So with an INI file, that's just anything that's not in a group, but that's going to be a little bit more explicit in a YAML file. Now let's show you. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over that more elaborate inventory file. So I'm going to jump over to this tab, where it's zoomed in a little bit more, just to make it a little bit easier to actually see the text. So let's look in here real quick. Opt inv hosts. So this is a little bit more elaborate of a, so this one right here is on group. This is more elaborate of an example. So we have this group with a couple hosts in it, another group with a couple hosts in it, and we have a web servers group. We have 3 hosts in here. And one thing we can specify in these files is we can use square brackets like this, and this will create hosts, you know, www01 through 50. So we can use a range like this. That's one convenient thing you can do. And another host just sitting in here. Now, notice we have this group web servers. If you scroll down here a little bit, you'll notice web servers :vars. This is a section to put variables that will apply to all hosts in the web servers group. Now, notice we have DB:children. That means this is a higher level group, a group that contains groups. So when you specify children, that means the group DB is going to have two subgroups or children inside that group. So you're going to have your PostgreSQL and your MySQL group. And then for DB, we're also specifying vars. So these variables will apply to anything inside the DB group, which will in turn apply to anything inside Postgres or MySQL groups. Now, moving along down here, we see the actual Postgres group, PostgreSQL. So we have two hosts inside here. And then in the MySQL group, we have three hosts inside the MySQL group. Now, host 1 has a couple variables specified for it. We have the HTTP port and max requests per child. So we have a couple variables that will apply only to this host, whereas these variables apply to everything in both groups. These variables only to this host. Now, this right here, test 45, we're actually specifying, so we have a colon after the host name, and we can specify a custom port number for SSH. So that's going to use SSH, not Paramiko. So in any case, custom port number there, that's not really a separate variable, but just a port number. Now for localhost, we want to run things against the local host. So we're going to set a variable, Ansible connection equals local. So when it tries to reach this, it's not going to SSH to it. It's just going to use a local connection. So that's basically everything I wanted to show you in this config file. That's how you set up groups and variables. It's a little bit more elaborate of an example. So you can have groups, and you can have groups of groups, and you can have variables on a host level, a group level, or a parent group level. So let's just jump out of here and let's take a look at an equivalent hosts file. So let's look at hosts 2. Now in hosts 2, this is YAML. So it's formatted a bit differently. Indentation matters in YAML files. So at the top here, you're going to see ungrouped, and you have to specify hosts and the actual host name, and make sure you have a colon after the host name, or actually after each of these. Without a colon, you're going to get syntax errors. So you actually explicitly set this as ungrouped, and now you have again, you have group 1, group 2. You specifically have to say hosts and then list the hosts, again with colons at the end of each one. Now keep on scrolling down here, and notice we have web servers, and you have hosts, and then a list of hosts under web servers. Then you have vars, a vars section, and so this is notice this is a little bit more organized than the INI file. Now under vars, we have a port specified and another, just a random variable, just as an example, x equals 50. Instead of an equal sign, we're using colons because this is YAML. Now, if you go down even further, you see the same pattern. You have a DB group, and underneath that, you're going to have a PostgreSQL and a MySQL group, but instead of being in separate sections, they're actually underneath the DB group, so it kind of makes more sense conceptually. This is really a matter of preference, which you prefer. This is a little bit easier to read, and a lot of people are going to find YAML more convenient to work with if you're parsing this file for whatever reason, or generating it, and it does kind of make more sense. So you're going to list children, and you're going to have this group, and then you're going to list hosts in that group. Same deal with MySQL. It's a subgroup of DB, and you're going to list hosts and then the hosts in it. And then underneath hosts, you list the host-specific variables, same as we saw before, HTTP port and max requests per child. But you're just specifying different with a colon instead of an equal sign, and you actually list them underneath the actual host that they correspond to. So it's just a little bit different, but basically achieves the same thing. Notice we have a variables section for the whole group, for the group as a whole. So for DB, notice since it's indented at the same level as children, this is basically just 2 spaces right here. So this vars section applies to the group DB. So these variables apply to the entire group DB. So everything underneath it, the Postgres group, the MySQL group, and all the hosts under them, these variables will apply to all of those. And I believe this is the end of the file. So that's basically it. That's everything I wanted to show you for the YAML file. Now, there's some more stuff I wanted to show you regarding variables and how you can work with them. So the next big thing you're going to want to be aware of are, let's see, we've covered ini files and YAML files. So yeah, so the next thing is going to be variables and groups. So you can, let's see here. We've covered all of that stuff. So we want to talk about var files. So you can have var files for group variables and host variables. So let's exit out of here. And we're going to take a look at, and let's see here. Let's see Ansible group variables. So let's take a look at group variables first. So notice under here, all right, we have a directory. We have a YAML file and a DB file. So I'm just going to run a find on this. Let's see, do I have the tree command? There we go. Perfect. All right. So under etc Ansible group vars, we have a directory here and we have a YAML file here. Now, this YAML file, notice the name of the YAML file, web servers, that's the name of one of the groups. So notice we're under group variables. So this matches one of the groups in our inventory file, and the name DB also matches one of the groups in our inventory file. So all variables inside this YAML file are going to apply to that group, to the web servers group. But then if we place an actual directory inside your group vars dir, any file under this directory, so any variables in the control.yaml or the data.yaml, both of these will just apply to whatever group matches the name DB, matches this directory name. So that way you can have multiple files all applying to one group. So just name it, just make sure the name corresponds to the group name. Either the directory name or your file name at this level will correspond to a group name. Let's take a quick look at this. So let's see. Nothing special in here. These are just example variables files, but you look at web servers, just a few variables, put 3 dashes at the top of the file. That's just how you format it. And you're going to specify 3 variables in YAML format. Nothing super exciting. They're just example variables. They're not important. They don't do anything. All right, so next thing I'm going to show you that was, let's actually take a look at what's under DB. So sure, web servers, now the stuff under DB, nothing too exciting here, but yeah, under control, we have some example variables, and same thing if you look at data. So more example variables, they don't do any, theoretically you could specify a useful variable like this, the data directory, if you're using that inside some playbook. But this is just an example of the types of variables that could be included to, so basically these are going to be included for anything in this group and apply to a playbook that's executed against any of those hosts. Basically, that's the basic idea anyways. So next thing I want to show you is, so that was group variables. Next thing I want to show you is host vars. So you're going to have a similar directory. Instead of group vars, you can have host vars like this. I'm just going to go straight ahead and use the tree command, and there we go. So etc Ansible host vars, and the other thing I should mention before I forget, group vars and host vars are going to be relative to your inventory file. So right now, these won't be included since I changed the inventory file inside, inside my Ansible config. Now, before, when we were using etc Ansible hosts, this host dir and the group vars dir, they would be relative to the inventory file. But since I changed it to opt-inv, if I actually wanted these to work, I would have to put the host vars directory and the group vars directory inside opt-inv if I were to stick with any of those inventory files, right? But if you're sticking with etc Ansible hosts, then host vars and group vars would be relative to the inventory file and they would be picked up. So yeah, anyways, just make sure the host vars and group vars directories are relative to your inventory file that you're currently using. So in any case, yeah, so under host variables, so same concept as the group variables. Basically, the file name or directory name is going to match your host name. So we have a host called host1. This file name matches host1, and this one matches host2, and this directory matches host3. So any files in this inside this directory, regardless of what they're named, are going to apply to host3. So data1 and data2 apply to host3. Host1 and host2 apply to host1 and host2. So that's bit, yeah, same concept. Now let's just take a look at them just to see. Let's see here. They're just example variables, nothing important. We're just going to take a look at them just to see anyways. So here, yeah, file starts off with 3 dashes and has some variables defined. Pretty simple stuff. Just a basic YAML file. Same deal with host 2. And let's see here, host 3. So host 3, you're going to have data 1 and data 2. Now, these are just example files, but you can see basically it's specifying a variable that stands for the data directory. So this points to one data directory, and this one points to another data directory. I'm not actually using those in a playbook right now, but that's the type of thing that you could use if you wanted to set something up like this. And that is everything I wanted to cover with host vars and group vars directories. That's basically everything that I wanted to cover in regards to inventory for today. Now, there are other things you can do with inventory, like dynamic inventory, and you can also use inventory plugins to pull from like a cloud provider or whatever service you're using. If you're using something locally for virtual machines, if you have like a VMware or ESXi or wherever you're pulling from, there are a bunch of different plugins you can use to pull from like AWS or Azure or Google Compute Engine. So you can use those plugins in the real world. A lot of times you're going to use those plugins to pull from things. But yeah, in this that's another topic for another day. But yeah, in this video, we're just showing you how to use a basic config file. And oftentimes, if you are using a cloud like that, you're still just going to pull down the info from that cloud and just insert it into an inventory file like what we looked at today. But that is up to you. But there are other options out there and more things to know. Just be aware of that. There are more things to know about in regards to inventory. But that's another topic for another day. This is just basic inventory and variables and things that you should be aware of to get going with Ansible. Remember, check the link in the description for commands and examples. Hopefully this was useful. Now, this video is part of a series, so make sure you check out the other videos in this playlist if you want to learn everything. We also put out a ton of other great tech-related content, including Linux and Windows stuff, hardware, software, coding, electronics, Raspberry Pi stuff, robots, 3D printing, networking, and a ton of other stuff. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. It'll make your feed that much more interesting. Also, make sure you hit the bell icon so you actually get a notification when new videos come out. And that's it for today. So, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys on that next video.